Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page. Today's podcast is our second edition in the summer of our Best Of. This is where we look at the best clips that we've had on various topics. Last one was on the client experience, and this one's going to be on succession planning. And one of the things I still find amazing is we have these great business owners. They build these incredible businesses and they serve clients who really rely on them, and they rely on them to create wealth for their families. They rely on them for advice. They hope to have that advice for a long period of time. And yet one of the shocking statistics is 80% of advisors don't have a defined succession plan, which I find it, again, an amazing thing. We spend all this time giving advice to our clients, giving advice on how they should structure their affairs to make sure that their next generations are looked after, to make sure that their legacy lives on. And yet it's an amazing thing that no one looks internally. Right? It's a topic I talk about with advisors almost every week. And the average age of advisors continues to grow. That's just demographics. And looking at the future, it's even more important as these demographics continue to become a bigger and bigger part of the wealth management business. So ask yourself these questions. And this is what we're going to go through with the best ofs. How do you pass on your business? How do you pass on your legacy? How do you build a life of retirement that you're going to love? How do you make sure that your clients are prepared for it? Now's the time to use that leverage to build that business, not only today, but what it's going to look like in the future. So do you have a succession plan set up? As I said, I talk every week to somebody about succession planning. And if you'd like to talk about your succession plan, let's do a virtual coffee. This has been a topic that comes up over and over and over. So let's go through some of the best podcasts we've had and some of the great guests we've had on this topic and see what they had to say. The first one that is George Hartman. George Hartman's been in the industry forever, right? He's been a veteran, way back from when even I started the business. George was in it, and he talked to us in his podcast about start with the end in mind, which is always a good idea. So if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up nowhere, is what George says. It's important to start with the end in mind and build your business backwards for there. So take a listen to what George has to say. Here's the difficult part, and I get this a lot. How do you start that conversation? You're an advisor, you've had a great career, you love what you do, but now you see the horizon. How do you start that conversation? What's your advice to people?
Well, I think the first thing is to recognize you're not immortal. And there will come a day when you will leave the business, whether you choose to or not. And
true.
So it's inevitable. And whether you call it a succession, an exit, a transition, a retirement, however you choose to describe it, it will happen. And so we may as well be prepared for it. I have long been a believer in Stephen Covey's start with the end in mind kind of philosophy, right, and that building a vision for your business is essential to its success. And I think that continues in the kind of a normal course review of your business as you age, answering the question, what do I want my business to look and feel like at some point down the road? And when you get up into late 50s, early 60s, the picture changes. It's less about growth and about making progress and building profile and so on, and much more about, what do I want the future of my business to look like? And sometimes that's driven by an event or circumstance. Obviously, we see people who unfortunately suffer some health or disability issue that forces them to think about that, or they might see one of their colleagues getting ready for retirement. Psychologically, I think a big part of it is that advisors need to kind of get over the fact that simply putting together a succession plan doesn't signal the end of their career. It's kind of like, I remember back in my early days, if you were talking to some clients, for example, about purchasing life insurance, they somehow thought that meant they were going to die. Well, eventually that would happen,
Yeah,
but it wasn't planned for a long way. So we need to accept the fact. And the good news is in that, Chris, that as you know, the timeline over which people are planning their exit now is stretched out immensely.
Right.
Immensely. When I was first coaching around this topic, going back 10 plus years, we used to think 12 to 18 months was a good time horizon or a good runway to plan this. Now, easily people are talking 2 to 3 years commonly, 5 to 10 is not uncommon. So.
Yeah, no, we see it all the time. And to expand on what you said, I remember one of the advice that I got early in my career, and it was great advice, is build your business to sell. Don't build it around you. And I think one of the things that many entrepreneurs do is they help build the entire practice or business around themselves. And very, very difficult to sell a business that is all around a person or their personality or them. Where if you build a business to sell, and for those who know my background, I've sold my business many times, including my practice. And I think that was some of the best advice that I've ever heard, is build it to sell, build it so it's easily taken over by somebody else. The next podcast is all about family. A lot of people are bringing their family members into their business, whether it's their sons, their daughters, their extended relatives. And this is a great type of topic that many people still struggle with. And so we had Sonia Leroy and her family, and this topic it starts with family. Sonia is a prime example how bringing your family members into the business and setting them up for success can be a great succession plan. Plus, with family, there's a whole different level of motivation to make sure they succeed other than just dollars and cents. So let's listen to what Sonia and her family have to say on this topic. You're now the sort of mastermind putting this together, and there's a whole bunch of advisors listening to this show that want to know what you know. So what have you seen as some of the things? And then to your point, how have you overcame them?
Well, I remember how tough it was to first get established as an advisor, back when I was 10.
Right.
But remember, Adrian and Rowan come from the same place I do. You heard Adrian say, being a young Black man wasn't a barrier for me, but I know, he's got the same great grandmother that I had as a grandmother.
Right.
So tough doesn't mean tough. It's just a consideration.
Right.
But since then, our industry has become more complex. It's become more expensive to practice, and the barriers really have only increased, even if we don't feel them as barriers. I do not know how a young person today could even begin to launch a career the way I did without the support of a base income or buying a book of business. So, as the senior advisor wanting to introduce a younger generation to my practice with a view to having them stick around for the long term, for continuity for my clients, I have to consider these things, which is why I gave rather than sold Adrian that first round of accounts to be responsible for, and why I felt I had to pay him a wage as he became more established. And those expenses and requirements, I think, have only grown since then. Now we're working out what it might look like for Rowan as she integrates into our team as a planner. Now, I had a few false starts with other junior advisors before Adrian and I started working together so closely with our clear succession plan in place. Being an advisor is really good work. And it really helps people. And if you do it well, it looks easy.
Like everything.
And life is good.
Yeah.
But every good advisor also knows that looking easy is not, in fact, easy. So the problem I encountered with junior advisors was that as we worked together, they would soon want what I had, and my training and time and money ended up basically, launching them into an independent path of their own, which was great for them. But then my succession plan was right back where it started.
Started over again.
So for me, what I discovered is with family, I think it's different.
Right.
And I think this is why there are so many family teams in this industry that are so successful. Maybe it could also be different with a non-family member, as long as that clear vision was in place and a clear plan of action bought into by all parties, in support of that vision.
Right.
But with family, we would want them to succeed no matter what,
Right.
whether that was in my practice or otherwise. So the investment would always be worth it anyway. But here's the thing that I've discovered with family: there's an extra level of two-way loyalty that enables maybe a deeper level of trust and
Right.
commitment on all sides. And therefore, there's a much higher chance of success in achieving that smooth succession that is non-disrupting for our clients, which is what I think all of us are going for.
The next great podcast guest we had was Bill Black. Now, I've known Bill Black for years. He was a great advisor. He built a fantastic business up in the Owen Sound area and just an all-around great guy. And Bill talks about how to make yourself redundant. And many people have a hard time with this, but how do you make a really successful business unless you're willing and able to step away? So what Bill talks about is build your business around you becoming redundant. If you walked away from it today, would your business still succeed? And if it's not going to succeed without you, you really haven't built a great business, because would your team, would your clients be able to move on and grow? If not, it's something to look at for proper succession planning. So Bill's a great person to talk about in this topic. So let's hear what Bill has to say. The other one that comes across, I know we've talked about it before, is the simplicity of your business. If your business is overly complex or overly reliant on a single person, and that could be you, that person is hard to replace and therefore not as valuable as one who has a simplistic business that can be easily transferred from person to person.
Absolutely. One of the mantras we always lived by in our business was we should not have an advisor that was not replaceable. In other words, if you're running a business, you want to be redundant. And the minute that you're redundant, you have a business that creates value for someone to take a look at. And if the business is not run like a business and it's a personal services organization, that means that the person isn't there, the value is not there.
Yep, I could not agree more. You probably remember I used to use the example of Tim Hortons versus Pete's Donuts. Which one is more valuable? Right? Because anyone can run a Tim Hortons, but only Pete can run Pete's Donuts. So it's quite that. That's the contrast. How do you develop that Tim Hortons versus being Pete?
Exactly. And I think that the simplicity of running a business is if you have simplicity in the business, then you can concentrate on what's important. And I know that IPC has been preaching this for many years to advisors, and we certainly do the same. When we look at a business and we're trying to help with a transition, one of the things we want to do is clean the business up, take a look at it, make it simple, get it prepared for an ultimate transition, because most businesses are really not prepared. And the value of that business can be increased by properly structuring it. And finally, two other guests that we had on the show was Jason Simpson and Stephanie Power. So these are actually a son and a daughter of some very, very successful advisors who have decided not only to retire, but to pass their businesses on to their children. And both of Jason and Stephanie have just done a fantastic job at taking over their businesses, and they were set up right. So what this show is all about is, it can take a while for succession planning to do it right, but what are the steps that you should be taking? Setting up a successor for success, as well as making your clients feel that there's a plan in place, is so important in this topic. And so I thought this was great. We had a lot of good banter and a lot of good advice. So take a listen to Jason Simpson and Stephanie Power on what they had to say about succession planning, and especially about working with their parents on that type of role, and how difficult it was, but also how positive it ended up to be. Now, what everyone wants to know is, how do you make it a smooth transition? So maybe tell me about your experiences, like exactly what you went through and how long it took, because a lot of people really underestimate this and the length of time that it takes to take over this business. So Stephanie, I'm going to start with you. What makes it smooth? What was the length of time? And what did you learn through that transition?
Sure. I worked with my mom for 10 years. before taking over. Yeah, 10 full years. And I think what really worked for us was that we operated our book of clients as a joint book. So instead of, I have my clients and she has hers, we operated it together as a team. So if a client called and she wasn't here, they could deal with me. And that was really a good introduction and allowed me to, kind of show off some of my strengths to clients as well.
Right. And so there wasn't any difficulties once she actually did pull back, nothing?
No, well, the other thing is, she's still here. She's retiring at the end of this year completely. But what happened was when we decided that I was going to take over, she decided to stay on for 2 years and just work part-time. So scaling back to part-time allowed allowed myself to kind of get in front of clients more because I'm here at the office full-time and they can call and talk to me. And there is a certain element that a client is going to go to what they're used to if they're still there.
Sure. Yeah.
So you kind of have to gently force that along a little bit.
Yeah, no, and I've heard that as well. How about you, Jason? What made it smooth? What was the length of time? And what did you learn through that process?
Well, like Stephanie, we kind of took a team approach because we had that luxury. My dad wanted to keep working and he's still working, although just like Stephanie's mom, he's scaling back into retirement. So that helps. But what we did, what our basic approach was during the transition was we took it on a kind of a client by client basis. We went through their file, we went through their portfolio. I'd asked my dad, not just about the numbers, but also what are they like? What is their personality? What are they going to find most valuable? And we really took our time with it, again, because we had that, we had the ability to do so since we're family and we were in it for the long term here. So that made the meetings go really well. There was some opportunity to consolidate investments, save on costs potentially with certain people. But mainly, we just really wanted to do a very warm introduction, add value where we could, and make sure everyone was comfortable. And it went well. In terms of the timing, we moved about a third of my dad's book 7 or 8 years ago when I first made the switch to IROC, and then the other 2/3 are just about wrapped up now. So we kind of did it in 2 parts, and for better or for worse, it's worked out for us.
Actually, that's an interesting point, and one that probably we should explore is you went to IROC while Gary stayed on the MFDA, and that was sort of the process to eventually move the book to IROC. Any comments on how the clients adjusted to that, and were they pretty happy?
Yeah, I think for some, there were bigger benefits than others. We tried to make it so that there was never a downside. It was either going to be a neutral lateral move or a positive to the bottom line. So that was good. Although I will say that, when it comes to the MFDA to IROC and the father to the son,
Right.
it adds a different dynamic. You're trying to get someone to like you, and meanwhile you're throwing a little extra paperwork at them, which they might not be thrilled to do. So it's a little counterintuitive, but we made it through, and it's worked well for our clients and for us.
So as you've heard from the best of clips, we have a bunch of guests talking about succession plan and the real importance of it, and why all business owners need to focus on, whether it's today, whether it's 5 years from now, or whether it's 10 years from now. It takes a lot of planning to do it right and make sure that your business is intact, your staff feel happy, and that your clients remain being served as they've always been served, and that business lives on. So as we've talked about, 80% of people don't even have a succession plan. People who have businesses, who have these beautiful, beautiful wealth management businesses, don't even have a succession plan. So if you're not sure where to start, let's talk. Happy to have a virtual coffee. Happy to talk about what you would like to see in your ultimate succession plan and how to put those things in place to be successful. So you can listen to each one of these episodes in their totality on your favorite podcast app. But we also have other episodes. We have episodes on technology, on embracing change, on, of course, you heard last week on the client experiences. So feel free, go back, listen to the episodes. And in your particular case, if you haven't thought about succession planning, you're not sure where to start, what to do next, just go to the link in the notes. You can contact me directly. Happy to have a virtual coffee. With that, look forward to talking to everybody on the next upcoming episodes. Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over a virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.